Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. Meet Julia, a young woman with dreams bigger than her circumstances. For as long as she could remember, Julia had always worked multiple jobs just to keep herself afloat. She had been a waitress at a local cafe for the past few months, always serving with a smile, despite her personal struggles. Her dream of opening her own art gallery had to wait another day as she juggled shifts, bills, and the constant worry of not having enough money. But today was different. Today, something was about to happen that would change everything. It was a busy evening when Julia stepped into the upscale restaurant, a place she could only dream of visiting as a guest, let alone working there. The rich, warm aroma of gourmet food filled the air, and soft murmurs of conversation surrounded her. The kind of place where people walked in with their heads held high, wearing the finest clothes, and leaving with full bellies and high spirits. But Julia, she barely belonged here. Her second-hand dress, scuffed shoes, and the nervous glint in her eyes screamed that she was out of place. She had promised her best friend Jenny that she would go through with this blind date, even though she wasn't sure about it. "I'm here for Kevin," Julia mumbled to herself, scanning the restaurant for a table. "Table S," she murmured under her breath, her heart pounding in her chest as her palms grew sweaty. Her mind raced as she wondered whether this blind date would be as awkward as all the others Jenny had set up for her. Her eyes finally found a table near the back of the room where a man was sitting alone, engrossed in his phone. He was dressed impeccably, a sharp black suit hugging his frame perfectly. He looked exactly like the type of man Jenny had warned her about: quiet, successful, and probably expecting someone polished and elegant. Julia took a deep breath, adjusting the strap of her bag and gathering every ounce of courage she had. As she walked over to him, her heart raced, the sound of her footsteps muffled by the soft hum of conversation. She approached his table, her voice slightly shaky as she smiled. "Hi, you must be Kevin. I'm Julia." The man looked up, his eyes wide with surprise. For a moment, he didn't speak, clearly caught off guard. He blinked, a bit confused, and then finally responded, "Hi, Julia." Julia, assuming he was just shy, sat down without waiting for much of a greeting. She smiled nervously, trying to break the ice. "I know this is awkward. Blind dates are always strange, right? Jenny told me you might be a little quiet, so don't worry. I can talk enough for both of us." The man smiled faintly, though his expression seemed uncertain. He glanced at his phone again, quickly checking a text message, and then looked back at her. "Right. Blind dates are something else." Julia laughed awkwardly, taking a sip of water to calm her nerves. "Tell me about it." "Jenny has been trying to set me up for months now, but I've been so busy with work." The man nodded, curious despite himself. "What do you do?" Julia hesitated, her eyes drifting to the table as she fiddled with the edge of her napkin. "I'm a waitress," she said, offering a weak smile. "Not exactly glamorous, but it pays the bills. Well, most of them anyway." The man nodded and then replied, "I work in tech." "Tech?" Julia's eyes brightened. "Like coding and apps and stuff?" "I'm terrible with computers, but I think that's really cool." The man gave a small, somewhat amused smile. Something like that. They both fell into a comfortable silence, the awkwardness slowly melting away as the conversation began to flow. Julia found herself telling him about her struggles, the long hours at the cafe, the challenge of keeping up with her bills, and her dream of one day opening an art gallery. The man listened intently, and for the first time in a long while, Julia felt like she could actually talk to someone. They were so different, yet for some reason this felt easy. "So, what do you do in tech?" she asked, a little more relaxed now. "I work with a lot of startups," he replied vaguely. Julia nodded, not sure what to make of that, but figuring that was enough for now. "I guess we all have our dreams," she said with a small laugh, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "I want to open my own gallery someday. To have a place where art can thrive, where people can experience the beauty of it, really feel it." He watched her for a moment, his smile softening. "You'll get there," he said, his voice steady. Julia blinked, surprised by the sincerity in his words. They sat there for a while longer, exchanging small talk and getting to know each other better. Julia was starting to feel more at ease with him, and she even forgot for a moment that this was supposed to be a blind date. But as she looked at her phone, she saw a message from Jenny. "Hey, where are you? I'm at table 7, looking forward to meeting you, Kevin. Julia's heart dropped. She looked up at the man in front of her, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. You're not Kevin, are you? She asked in a barely audible voice. The man's smile faltered, guilt flickering in his eyes. No, I'm not, he admitted. Julia stood up immediately, her face burning with humiliation. Oh my God, I'm so sorry, she stammered, grabbing her coat and rushing out of the restaurant. The man stood up, calling after her, but she was already gone, her feet carrying her quickly down the street, her mind racing. Little did she know, this mistake, this simple mix-up was the beginning of something that would change her life forever. Julia rushed out of the restaurant, her heart pounding in her chest. She couldn't believe what had just happened. How could she have mistaken a complete stranger for Kevin? Her face was flushed with embarrassment as she made her way down the street, her mind racing. What was supposed to be a simple blind date had turned into a disaster. The feeling of humiliation settled in her chest like a heavy weight. She kept replaying the moment in her head, wishing she could take it all back. She could still hear his voice, calm and apologetic, as she ran out. It's okay, Emma. It stung. She should have known better. Julia wasn't used to places like that. Places where people seemed to effortlessly glide in and out of expensive restaurants, confident and well-dressed. She wasn't part of their world. She didn't belong. It was just another reminder of how far she was from the life she had always dreamed of. Julia had always believed that if she worked hard enough, she could make her dreams come true, but in moments like this, doubt crept in. She paused for a second to catch her breath and tried to calm the whirlwind of emotions inside her. She reached for her phone to check her messages and saw one from Jenny. Where are you? I'm at table 7, waiting for you. Can't wait to meet Kevin. Julia sighed, looking at the message, feeling even more defeated. She was too embarrassed to text back. Instead, she shoved her phone back into her bag and started walking aimlessly down the street. Her thoughts began to drift back to the life she had left behind, working long hours at the cafe just to make ends meet, struggling to pay rent, and feeling like everything was slipping away. But no matter how hard it was, she never gave up. She had dreams, big dreams. She wanted to open an art gallery, a place where young artists could showcase their work, a space where people could come together and share their love for art. But it all seemed so far away. She had no connections, no money, no one to turn to for help. The only thing she had was herself and the determination to keep going. After what felt like hours of walking, Julia finally made it back to her small apartment. The sound of the keys rattling in the door seemed to echo in her mind as she entered. It was small, modest, with peeling paint on the walls and old furniture that had been passed down through the years. But it was hers. She kicked off her shoes and collapsed onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. Why do I even try? She whispered to herself, her voice muffled by her palms. She couldn't help it. She had been dreaming of a better life for so long, but it felt like she was stuck in a cycle that never ended. The room was silent, save for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sounds of the city outside. She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath, trying to calm her racing thoughts. She knew she couldn't stay like this forever. She had to keep moving forward. Julia stood up and went to the small kitchen, opening the refrigerator to see what little she had left. A half-empty carton of milk, some leftover takeout, and a few wilted vegetables. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. She grabbed a bowl and started to prepare something for dinner, her movements slow and mechanical. She was just about to sit down and eat when her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from an unknown number. Hi, it's Liam. I was the guy you sat with at the restaurant earlier. I know it was a mistake, but I'd like to make it up to you. Would you be interested in getting coffee sometime? Julia froze, staring at the screen. Her first instinct was to ignore it. After all, he was probably just some guy trying to be nice, nothing more. But then, something about his message caught her attention. He wasn't asking her to apologize for leaving. He wasn't making her feel bad for the awkwardness. Instead, he seemed to genuinely want to make things right. The vulnerability in his words was oddly comforting. Julia hesitated for a moment before typing a reply. Okay, coffee sounds nice. When and where? She hit send and immediately felt a rush of nerves. What was she doing? Was she crazy? She didn't know anything about this guy, and yet she was already agreeing to meet him again. She couldn't deny that there was something about him, something that made her want to give him a chance. She looked at the message again. Maybe this was the universe's way of throwing her a lifeline. Maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something new. The next day, Julia met Liam at a small cafe tucked away from the hustle and bustle of the city. When she arrived, he was already sitting at a corner table. Dressed casually in a gray sweater and jeans, his demeanor calm and relaxed. There was no tension, no expectation. Just two people, sitting across from each other, sharing a simple cup of coffee. Liam looked up when she entered and smiled, a warm, genuine smile that put her at ease. "Hi, Julia," he said, his voice steady but soft. "I'm glad you came." Julia smiled back, taking a seat across from him. "Thanks for inviting me," she said, her voice a little shakier than she wanted it to be. They talked about everything and nothing: their favorite movies, books, the struggles of adult life, and their dreams. Julia was surprised by how easily the conversation flowed. It was different from the forced small talk she had expected. There was something refreshing about Liam, something real. As they sat there, Julia found herself thinking about the strange encounter the night before. Could one small mistake really lead to something good? Could this be the beginning of a new chapter in her life? The next few days were a blur for Julia. She kept thinking about her coffee with Liam. It wasn't just the coffee itself, but the way he made her feel like she wasn't just another face in the crowd. He actually listened to her, like what she said mattered. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she could be herself. After their coffee date, they exchanged a few more messages, and eventually, Liam invited her to an art gallery opening he was attending. Julia was hesitant at first. She was used to small cafes, not the glittering, high-profile events that people like Liam frequented. But something about him made her want to say yes, so she did. The night of the gallery opening arrived, and Julia felt her nerves go into overdrive. She stood in front of her closet, staring at her clothes. Her usual casual outfits didn't feel right for this event. She needed to look the part, or at least try to. She settled on a simple black dress that she'd bought for an occasion like this, though it felt a bit too fancy for her. She looked at herself in the mirror, not quite recognizing the woman looking back. She wasn't used to dressing up, but tonight, she was going to try. Julia arrived at the gallery, her heart racing as she walked through the large, shiny doors. She immediately felt out of place, surrounded by elegant people in designer outfits, discussing art and business. It was a world she wasn't familiar with. But then, she spotted Liam. He was standing by the entrance, talking to a group of people, but when he saw her, his face lit up. He excused himself from the conversation and walked over to her. "Julia, I'm so glad you could make it," he said with a warm smile. His voice was calm and inviting, and for a moment Julia felt at ease. "You look beautiful," he added, his words genuine. Julia's cheeks flushed, and she couldn't help but smile. "Thank you," she said softly, feeling the weight of all the eyes in the room on her. "This place is impressive," she said, trying to make conversation. "It is," Liam agreed. "But it's not the art that makes it special, it's the people, and I'm glad you're here." He guided her through the gallery, showing her some of his favorite pieces. They talked about the art, and as the evening went on, Julia found herself relaxing. She could actually enjoy herself. Liam wasn't like the others here. He didn't make her feel like an outsider. As the night wore on, they found a quiet corner of the gallery, away from the noise. Julia could feel the tension in her shoulders melt away as they talked about everything and nothing at all. They were talking about their dreams, their hopes, and their fears when Liam's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his face hardening for just a moment before he quickly hid the screen. Julia noticed but said nothing. Liam's mood shifted, and for the first time that night he seemed a little distant. He excused himself, saying he had to take a quick call. Julia nodded, feeling a pang of uncertainty in her chest. It wasn't like Liam to be distracted like this. She couldn't help but wonder what was going on. She tried to shake it off, telling herself she was overthinking it. But deep down, she felt a little uneasy. As she stood there, lost in her own thoughts, she caught a glimpse of a familiar face across the room. Jenny, her best friend, was standing near the bar, chatting with a group of people. Julia hadn't seen Jenny in weeks, and her heart lifted when she saw her. She excused herself from the corner and made her way over to her. "Hey, Jenny," she called out. Jenny turned, her face lighting up when she saw Julia. "Julia, I didn't expect to see you here. You look amazing," Jenny exclaimed. "Thank you," Julia replied, her smile growing wider. They hugged, and Julia could feel her nerves fading. Being around Jenny always made her feel at home. "So, how's the blind date going?" Jenny asked with a teasing grin. Julia hesitated, then smiled. "It's going well. Liam's really different than I expected. He's nice." Jenny raised an eyebrow. "Different? What do you mean by different?" "I don't know," Julia said, feeling a little uncertain. "I just feel like he's not what I expected, but in a good way." Just as she was about to say more, Liam appeared beside her. He smiled at Jenny and gave her a brief nod. "Jenny, it's good to see you again," he said. Jenny returned the smile, though Julia could see the flicker of something in her eyes. Maybe suspicion, maybe curiosity. She couldn't tell. "Good to see you, Liam," Jenny said, her tone polite. "I'm going to grab a drink. Let me know if you need anything, Julia." Julia nodded as Jenny walked away, but her mind was still focused on Liam. He had been distant again, and it was starting to bother her. He looked over at her, his smile warm, but Julia could tell something was on his mind. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. Liam paused for a moment before answering, his gaze fixed on the floor. "I'm fine," he said, his voice a little too casual. "Just some business stuff I have to take care of. Don't worry about it." But Julia could tell it wasn't just business. Something was off, and for the first time, she felt like Liam was hiding something from her. The night continued on with an air of subtle tension that Julia couldn't shake off. As she walked through the gallery with Liam, she kept stealing glances at him, trying to figure out what was bothering him. She knew something wasn't right. Liam had been distant ever since his phone call, and no matter how hard she tried to ignore it, she couldn't. Every time their conversation hit a pause, she could see him glancing at his phone, his brow furrowed. Something was off. She wasn't sure what, but it was making her feel uneasy. Eventually, they found themselves back at the bar, Liam ordering them both a drink, though his movements seemed distracted. Julia couldn't help but ask again. "Liam, are you sure everything's okay?" He looked at her, his eyes softening, but there was something behind them, something he wasn't saying. "Yeah, I'm fine," he replied, but the words didn't feel genuine. "Just some work stuff I need to take care of. You know how it is." Julia nodded, trying to let it go, but the unease only grew. She had never been good at hiding her feelings, and it was obvious to her that Liam wasn't being honest. "If you say so," she said, forcing a smile. The night was supposed to be about enjoying the art, about seeing each other in a new light, but all she could focus on was the space between them. Just then, the announcement for the evening's charity auction began, and the room seemed to fill with excitement as people gathered around. Julia, eager for a distraction, grabbed Liam's arm. "Let's go see the auction," she suggested, trying to change the subject. Liam hesitated, but then nodded, offering a half smile. As they walked toward the crowd, Julia couldn't help but notice how people reacted to Liam. They greeted him like he was someone important, someone with power. And yet, there was still that wall between them, something that felt like a secret he wasn't ready to share. As they stood near the auction stage, Julia noticed a familiar face in the crowd. It was Jenny, her best friend, who was chatting with some other guests. She waved at Julia from across the room, her face lighting up when she saw her. Julia smiled and waved back, but as she did, she saw Liam stiffen beside her. His eyes narrowed for a moment, and Julia wondered what was going through his mind. It was like a switch had flipped. He suddenly looked distant again, his gaze fixed on something far off in the distance. Julia's curiosity got the better of her. She glanced at him and then back at Jenny, wondering if Jenny noticed the shift. "Are you all right?" Julia asked, her voice soft. Liam turned to her, his expression quickly softening again, though his eyes still held that guarded look. "Yeah," he said, though it sounded forced. "I'm just a little tired, I guess. It's been a long week." Julia wasn't sure she bought it, but she let it slide, wanting to believe him. "Okay," she said quietly, glancing back at Jenny, who was now approaching them. "You sure you don't want to join us for a drink? It's been ages since we've caught up." Jenny's voice was bright, but Julia could see the skepticism in her eyes as she looked at Liam. "Maybe another time," Liam replied quickly, his tone flat. Jenny looked from him to Julia, her brow raised. Julia could feel the tension in the air, but before she could say anything, Liam smiled, a tight smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Thanks for the invite, Jenny, but I think we'll pass." Jenny seemed to pick up on the subtle tension as well, but instead of pressing, she simply nodded. "All right, well, enjoy the night, you two. I'll catch up with you later, Julia." As Jenny walked away, Julia was left standing there with Liam, feeling more uncertain than ever. Something about the way he had responded to Jenny's invitation didn't sit right with her. It wasn't just the disinterest, it was the way he had suddenly distanced himself from her. The evening's fun was slowly slipping away. She glanced at him once more, her mind racing, but instead of voicing her thoughts, she kept quiet. Maybe she was overthinking it. Maybe Liam was just stressed out, like he said. But deep down, a small voice told her there was more to this than just work. Liam, she started, but she hesitated. He turned to look at her, his expression softer now. Yeah? She took a deep breath. Is there something you're not telling me? For a moment, Liam didn't speak. His gaze drifted toward the auction stage again, and Julia could tell he was debating whether or not to tell her the truth. Finally, he sighed and shook his head. It's nothing, Julia. I'm just not ready to talk about it yet. Julia stared at him, wondering what he was hiding. She didn't know if she could believe him, but she chose not to press him any further. Not tonight. She wasn't sure if it was the right decision, but she had a feeling this wouldn't be the last time she would wonder what Liam was hiding. The evening passed in a blur, and Julia could feel the weight of her unanswered questions lingering in the air between her and Liam. The art gallery's opening had been everything she had expected it to be. Glamorous, full of beautiful people and extravagant art, but there was an underlying tension she couldn't shake. After the brief conversation with Jenny, she found herself more confused than before. She tried to push away the nagging feeling that something was off, but every time she looked at Liam, there was something in his eyes that made her wonder if she truly knew him at all. The night wore on, and soon Liam suggested they leave. I think we've seen enough for tonight, he said, his voice quieter than usual. Julia nodded, not sure whether to push him for answers or to just let it go. She followed him out of the gallery, her mind still racing. The cold night air hit her like a wall as they stepped outside, and she hugged her coat tighter around herself. Liam walked beside her, but there was a noticeable distance between them now, a silence that hung heavy. Do you want to grab a drink or something? Julia asked, trying to break the tension. I could use something to relax. Liam hesitated for a moment before shaking his head. I think I'll just head home, he replied, his words short. Julia didn't know what to say to that. She couldn't ignore the feeling that something had shifted between them, but she didn't know what. As they reached the curb, Liam turned to her. I'll get a cab. I think you should go home and rest, he said, his voice still carrying that strange detachment. Julia looked up at him, feeling a mix of frustration and confusion. Are you sure everything is okay? She asked one last time, unable to hold it in any longer. Liam didn't answer immediately. He looked at her with a faint smile, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. It's fine. I just need some time to myself, that's all. Julia nodded, though she wasn't convinced. She watched as he hailed a cab and got in without another word. She stood there for a moment, feeling completely out of place, before she turned and made her way home. She couldn't help but replay the evening in her head. Why had Liam been so distant? What had changed? And most importantly, why did it feel like he was hiding something from her? The next day, Julia tried to push her questions to the back of her mind. She had work to focus on, and her shift at the cafe was just around the corner. She walked through the familiar streets of the city, the sounds of traffic and people bustling by filling the air. As much as she tried to distract herself, her thoughts kept drifting back to Liam. What was it about him that had made her feel like she could trust him? Why did she feel like there was more to him than he was letting on? Her phone buzzed in her pocket, interrupting her thoughts. She pulled it out to find a text from an unknown number. Hi Julia, it's Liam. I hope you're doing well. I was wondering if you wanted to meet up again. Let me know. She stared at the message for a moment, unsure of how to respond. The night before had left her with so many unanswered questions, and now here he was, reaching out to her again. She took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. Was it a good idea to meet him again? Was he being genuine, or was there something else going on? Julia's hand hovered over the keyboard as she tried to think of the right words to reply. After a few seconds, she typed, "Sure, coffee sounds good. When and where?" She hit send before she could second-guess herself. A few moments later, Liam responded, "How about 3 p.m. at that little cafe we went to last time?" Julia smiled a little to herself, a small glimmer of hope flickering in her chest. Despite everything that had happened, despite the unease she felt, she still wanted to see him again. She needed answers. The clock seemed to move in slow motion as she waited for the time to come. She wasn't sure what to expect, but she knew she couldn't keep avoiding the truth. At 3 p.m., she arrived at the cafe, a familiar spot that had become a small haven in the chaos of her life. Liam was already sitting at their usual table, his eyes scanning his phone. As she walked over to him, he looked up and smiled. It wasn't the same warm smile he had given her the first time they met, but it was a smile nonetheless. "Hey, Julia," he greeted her. "It's good to see you again." Julia sat down across from him, her heart beating a little faster than usual. "You too," she replied, forcing a smile. The conversation began with small talk, just like their first meeting. But this time, Julia couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more at play here. Liam was holding back, and she knew it. She tried to keep the conversation light, but her mind kept drifting to the things she wanted to ask him. Finally, after a few minutes, she decided to take the plunge. "Liam, what's going on? Why have you been acting so distant?" Liam looked at her, his face unreadable. For a moment, he didn't say anything, and Julia thought he might brush her off. But then, his expression softened. "I didn't mean to be distant," he said, his voice quieter now. "I just have some things going on, things I'm not ready to share yet." Julia felt her heart drop a little. "Liam, I don't know what's going on, but I can't keep doing this. I can't keep pretending like everything is fine when I know it's not." He looked at her for a long moment, and just as she was about to get up and leave, he spoke again. "I owe you an explanation, and I'll give it to you, but not here, not right now." Julia's heart raced, but she didn't know what to say. What was he hiding? What was he going to say? Julia sat there, her heart pounding in her chest as she stared at Liam, waiting for him to explain. The silence between them felt thick, like it was closing in on her. She could see the conflict in his eyes, the hesitation, like he was trying to figure out how to say what was clearly weighing heavily on his mind. She was done with the half-truths, the vague answers. She needed the truth, and she needed it now. "Liam," Julia said, her voice softer now but firm. "If you're going to keep pushing me away, then maybe we shouldn't do this anymore. I can't keep doing the dance of I'm fine when I know something isn't right." Liam looked at her, his lips parted as if he wanted to say something but couldn't quite find the words. He sat back in his chair, running a hand through his hair, his gaze flicking to the side before meeting hers again. "I didn't want to drag you into this," he said, his voice quiet. "But the truth is, there's more to me than you realize. I've been hiding things that could change everything between us." Julia's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't sure what to expect, but this was not it. "What do you mean?" she asked, her mind racing. Liam took a deep breath and leaned forward slightly. "I wasn't being totally honest with you," he said slowly. "I'm not just some guy who works in tech. I'm the CEO of a company, and I've been, running away from it. From the pressure, from the expectations. I've been living a lie, pretending to be someone I'm not, even to myself. And I've been trying to keep you away from that world because I didn't want you to see the real mess I'm dealing with." Julia sat back in her chair, trying to process what he had just said. The Liam she had met, the kind, thoughtful, seemingly down-to-earth man, was a CEO? She had no idea. It felt like the ground beneath her was shifting, like she had been walking on solid ground only to realize it was made of sand. "You're telling me that this whole time you've been lying to me?" she asked, her voice a little shakier than she wanted it to be. "No, not lying," he said quickly, his hands raised in defense. I didn't tell you the whole truth. I didn't think it mattered. I didn't think it was something you needed to know." Julia shook her head, her emotions swirling inside her. She felt confused, hurt, and more than a little betrayed. "So, what was the point of all of this, Liam?" she asked, her voice cracking slightly. "Why did you even ask me out? Why did you get close to me if you were just going to keep this big secret?" Liam ran his hand through his hair again, frustration and guilt evident in his expression. "Because I didn't want to be alone, Julia. I didn't want to keep pretending like everything was fine, but I didn't know how to let anyone in, especially not someone like you." Julia looked at him, trying to make sense of his words. She had been drawn to him because of his authenticity, his vulnerability. But now the reality felt different. It felt like everything she thought she knew about him had been a carefully constructed lie. "So, what now?" she asked, the words slipping out before she could stop them. Liam took a deep breath and stood up, pacing for a moment before turning back to face her. "I don't want to lose you, Julia. I never wanted to hurt you," he said, his voice softer now, as though the weight of everything was starting to sink in. I need you to understand that I was scared. I didn't want you to look at me differently because of who I am or what I do. I just wanted to be me, the guy you met that night. Not the CEO, not the guy with all the problems, but just someone who could be with you without all the pressure." Julia's mind was spinning. She had never expected this. The man she had thought she knew was a completely different person than the one standing in front of her now. She didn't know what to believe anymore, or what to do with all of this new information. "I don't know what to say, Liam," she said, her voice quiet. "You've kept so much from me. I don't know if I can just forget about all of that. It's not about you being a CEO. It's about the fact that you didn't trust me enough to be honest from the start." Liam's expression softened, and he took a step closer to her, his voice full of emotion. "I know, and I'm sorry, but I want to make it right. I want to be real with you, Julia. I want us to be real. If you'll let me, I'll prove to you that what I feel for you is real. No more secrets, no more lies. Just us, whatever that looks like." Julia stared at him, her heart torn between the man she had gotten to know and the man who was standing before her now, revealing things she wasn't sure she was ready to hear. She wasn't sure if she was ready to let him back in, but she couldn't ignore the pull she still felt toward him. The connection they had was real, even if the path to it was complicated. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her racing thoughts. "I don't know if I can just forget, Liam, but I'm willing to listen. I'm willing to see where this goes, but only if you're completely honest with me from now on." Liam nodded, his eyes filled with relief. "I promise. I'll be honest, no matter what." Julia took another breath, trying to decide what to do next. She wasn't sure where this would go, or if she could trust him again, but she knew one thing for sure. The story between them wasn't over yet. And maybe, just maybe, they could figure out what came next together. Julia sat there, processing everything Liam had said. Her mind was spinning, torn between the man she had started to care for and the person he had just revealed himself to be. She had trusted him, opened up to him, and now she felt like her world had shifted again. The air between them felt heavy with unspoken words, yet at the same time, there was a strange sense of relief. She had heard the truth, finally, but now she wasn't sure how to move forward. "I need some time to think, Liam," she said quietly, looking at him. This is a lot to take in. I don't know what to do with all of it." Liam nodded, his expression softening with understanding. "I know, Julia. I didn't expect it to be easy, but I want to give you the time and space you need. I'm not going anywhere. I'll wait." The sincerity in his voice made her chest tighten. She knew he was being honest, but that didn't make it any easier. Her heart was telling her one thing, while her mind was screaming something else. She didn't know if she was ready to dive back into this. Everything had been so simple before, but now, it felt like she was standing at the edge of something she couldn't control. She stood up, taking a deep breath. I need to figure things out. I don't want to rush into anything," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I can just forget what's happened. You've been hiding so much from me, Liam." He stood up too, closing the distance between them. "I understand, Julia. I didn't want to hurt you, and I should have told you sooner. But I'm telling you now because I don't want to lose you. If there's a chance for us, I want to take it. But I'll respect whatever you need." Julia looked at him, seeing the vulnerability in his eyes. For a moment it felt like the whole world faded away, and it was just the two of them. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing. She wasn't ready to give up on this yet. She wasn't ready to let him go. "I'm not saying it's over, Liam," she said softly, her voice trembling a little. "But I need time. I need to understand where I fit into all of this. I can't just jump back in without knowing what this really means." Liam nodded again, his face a mixture of hope and relief. "Take all the time you need, Julia. I'm not going anywhere." Julia stepped back, her hand instinctively reaching for her bag. She felt like she needed to leave, to clear her head, to get some distance. But as she turned to walk away, she felt Liam's hand gently touch her arm. She looked up at him, startled, but his touch was reassuring, steady. "Don't go yet," he said, his voice low but filled with warmth. "I know you need space, but I need you to know that I'm here, no matter what happens." Julia stared at him for a moment, feeling the weight of his words sink in. It wasn't just the truth he had shared, but the way he was offering her his honesty, his heart. "I'll be here when you're ready, Julia," he repeated softly, his eyes filled with sincerity. Julia nodded slowly, her heart torn between the desire to run and the need to stay. She didn't know what to say, but she didn't want to walk away from him just yet. With one last lingering glance, she took a step back. "I'll think about it," she whispered before turning and walking away. As she left, her thoughts were scattered, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she wasn't alone in this. She didn't know where this journey would take her, but for now, she was willing to take the first step toward finding the answers she needed. Julia spent the next few days trying to make sense of everything that had happened. The weight of Liam's confession still lingered in her mind, and she couldn't stop thinking about the things he had said. She had spent her whole life believing in hard work and simple truths, but now she was faced with a world of complexity and secrets. As the days passed, Julia tried to focus on her routine, but every conversation at the cafe, every walk home, brought her back to Liam. She couldn't ignore the feeling that there was something real between them. But what did it mean? Was she willing to risk everything she had worked for to be with him? And could she trust him again after everything he had hidden from her? Her thoughts were a whirlwind of doubt and confusion. She hadn't heard from Liam since their conversation, and as much as she tried to move on, part of her still clung to the idea that they could find a way to make this work. But how? She wasn't sure. One afternoon, as Julia was heading home after her shift, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and saw a message from Liam. Her heart skipped a beat. "Hey Julia, I know we left things a bit unclear the other night, and I just wanted to check in. If you're up for it, I'd like to see you again. No pressure, just a chance to talk. Let me know when you're free." Julia stared at the message, her mind racing. She hadn't expected to hear from him so soon, and the vulnerability in his words made her heart ache. He wasn't asking for a second chance, not yet, but he was offering a conversation, a chance to clear the air. She could feel the pull, the desire to know more, to understand him better. But she still wasn't sure if she was ready. She had so many questions, so many fears. What if he was just trying to make up for his mistakes? What if it wasn't enough? She paused for a moment, taking a deep breath before typing a response. "I'm free tomorrow afternoon. Coffee again?" she wrote, her fingers trembling as she hit send. She didn't know what she was walking into, but she knew one thing. She needed to hear what he had to say. The next day, Julia arrived at the same cafe where they had met before. Her heart was in her throat, and she felt a mix of excitement and apprehension as she stepped inside. Liam was already there, sitting at their usual table, his expression a mix of hope and anxiety. When he saw her, he stood up immediately, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Hey," he said softly, his voice warm but unsure. "Thanks for meeting me." Julia nodded, her nerves still on edge. "Of course," she replied. They sat down, the air between them thick with unspoken words. For a moment, neither of them knew where to begin. But finally, Liam broke the silence. "I know I messed up, Julia, and I don't expect you to just forgive me or forget what I did. I don't even know if I deserve that. But I want to be honest with you, and I want you to know that I'm not here to play games. I've had enough of that in my life. I don't want to lie to you anymore." Julia listened, her heart pounding as she took in every word. He was being honest, and that was more than she had expected. She could hear the sincerity in his voice, and for the first time since their conversation, she felt like they were on the same page. "I know I've been distant, and I know I've pushed you away," Liam continued. "But I want you to know that I'm ready to face the consequences of my actions. I'm ready to stop running, and I'm ready to be with you if you'll let me." Julia's mind was still spinning, but she couldn't deny the warmth that spread through her chest as he spoke. He was being open, vulnerable, and that was something she hadn't expected. But as she looked at him, she still felt the weight of the past hanging over her. Could she truly move forward? Could she trust him again? "I don't know what to say, Liam," Julia said quietly. "I want to believe you, I do. But I still don't understand why you kept all of this from me. Why didn't you tell me from the beginning?" Liam's eyes softened with regret. "I was scared," he admitted. "I didn't want to lose you. I didn't want to bring all this into your life. I thought if I kept my distance, I could protect you from the mess I was in. But I was wrong." Julia nodded slowly, her gaze dropping to her hands on the table. She wanted to forgive him. She really did. But the question lingered. Was it enough? "I'm not sure I can just move past this, Liam," she said quietly. "I don't know if I can forget the secrets, the things you hid from me. But I'm willing to try. I'm willing to see where this goes, if you can prove that you're being honest with me." Liam's face lit up with relief, though there was still a touch of uncertainty in his eyes. "I will, Julia, I swear. I just need a chance to show you." Julia looked at him for a long moment, weighing her options. She had been hurt, but she also knew that life wasn't always perfect. It wasn't about finding someone without flaws, it was about finding someone who was willing to be real, willing to change. And maybe, just maybe, Liam was that person. She took a deep breath and smiled slightly. "Okay," she said softly. "Let's give this a shot." Over the next few weeks, Julia and Liam slowly began to rebuild the trust that had been shattered. It wasn't easy, and there were moments of doubt and hesitation, but both of them were determined to make it work. They spent more time together, talking through their feelings, sharing their fears, and understanding each other on a deeper level than they had before. Liam kept his word, being completely honest with her. No more secrets, no more half-truths. Julia found herself opening up in ways she hadn't expected, her walls slowly coming down as she saw the sincerity in his actions. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And for the first time in a long time, Julia felt like she was part of something that could last. One evening, As they sat on a park bench near the river, the soft breeze carrying the scent of spring, Liam turned to her, his expression serious, yet filled with warmth. "Julia," he began, his voice steady, "I know I've asked a lot from you already, but there's one more thing I need to say." Julia looked at him, her heart racing slightly, unsure of what he was going to say. "What is it?" she asked, her voice soft but curious. Liam took a deep breath, reaching into his jacket pocket and pulling out a small velvet box. He opened it, revealing a simple silver ring. "I want to spend the rest of my life with you," he said, his eyes locked with hers. "I know I've messed up, but I'm asking you now to take this step with me. Will you marry me, Julia?" Julia's breath caught in her throat as she stared at the ring. Her mind was racing, and for a moment she couldn't find the words. She had never expected this, not after everything that had happened. She had been unsure, hesitant to trust again, but now, with Liam's honesty, his vulnerability, she felt a sense of certainty she hadn't felt in a long time. She had come to see him not just as the man who had hidden his true self, but as the man who was brave enough to be vulnerable, to face his past, and to be real with her. She could see the future with him, the ups and downs, the challenges, but also the love, the real love, that they had begun to build. "Yes," she finally whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, I will marry you." Liam's face lit up with relief and joy. He slipped the ring onto her finger, his touch gentle as he held her hand. They both sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the moment sinking in. It wasn't about the ring or the proposal or even the perfect timing. It was about the trust, the growth, and the love they had found in each other. The journey they had started was far from over, but for the first time they both felt ready to face whatever came next, together. "I love you," Liam said softly, his voice full of emotion. "I love you too," Julia replied, her heart full. As they sat there, watching the sun dip below the horizon, they knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. No more secrets, no more running from the past. Just a future together, built on honesty, trust, and love.